Let's start out with the Rand McNally miles. I drove 2,479.7 miles and was paid for 2,323. Basically, this week, I did the same amount of work that I normally do, but I was paid about $250 less than normal. So yeah, I'm a bit bitter, and I'm not overly happy, and I wasn't willing to continue working tonight, even though this is technically my Friday, and you may say, well, you might make more of that $250 if you worked. Perhaps. But not knowing the situation from tonight. I don't know if this is going to be noticeable or not, but this contact lens is bothering me. I went for an eye doctor exam right before I started up my week, and I went through the process with the eye doctor, who was actually remote. The person was, they put the thing up in front of my face, and the person was on camera, but pushing buttons, and it was changing the lenses and stuff. And I was like, this eye's still blurry. When the person said, all right, this is your final prescription, I said, but this eye is still blurry. And they said, well, sometimes, it will be a little bit, it won't be as sharp as the other one. So sometimes your eyes don't match. I'm like, but this is actually blurry. Something you did a little while ago when you were rotating and back and forth, I said was better. Can you go back to that and let's start over? And says, well, try this prescription if it doesn't work for you for some reason. Sometimes when you put when you put it in, because my eyes kept drying out and I kept doing this number and having to use eye drops. He says, try it when your eyes are, well lubricated and stuff like that, and then we'll see what happens. I'm like, okay. So I went out and I told the person, I said, look, I'm not optimistic about it. My eyes are not happy. And I said, I drive also up to 70 hours a week. So, and I drive at night. So that's not going to be good. This eye is definitely blurry. And, she's like, all right, well, let us know if you need to come back in. So I was calling the next day. I was calling the day I was hitting the road saying, yeah, this eye is bad. I need to come back in there. So I've scheduled an appointment. So that will be in a few hours. From now it's 8 hours and 15 minutes. But that contact lens has screwed me up this week. I've had headaches while driving down the road. I've had, blurriness, blurry, sharp. It's annoying. Anyway, 12 hours after I finished work last week, I was pre-assigned a load to do that night. I'm getting really annoyed at JB Hunt doing this crap to me. Because this was quite literally like a few hours after I finished, and I have 2 full days off, plus, a regular, 10-hour off period. But this is 12 hours later. They sent me a load. And so I sent a message through the app that says, I need you to cancel this unless you want me to do this when I come back to work on Sunday. But it was a stupid load, in my opinion, because remember when I first started, if you've been watching this channel, my very first load I ever had was to go to Southwire and pick up a load of wire, and then take it out to Orangeburg, South Carolina. This was the same kind of thing. This was almost the exact same load. But I looked at it, and it had to be picked up that day, and it had to be delivered before like 4 a.m. So it's like, what is wrong with you people? Why would you schedule me that way? First of all, if I start up at 10 and I'm going the opposite direction, then if I were to drive straight the other direction by 4 a.m., that would be tough. If I start at 10 p.m. And by the time I get out to Carrollton, first of all, they're not going to let me pick up the Southwire until I get a stupid empty. So I'm going to have to find an empty someplace. Then I'm going to have to exchange the empty for whatever at Southwire, then take it out to Orangeburg. That's not going to happen in total 6 hours when Orangeburg is over 250 miles away from Carrollton. Anyway, so the next night, still the night before I'm starting up, I was sent a load. And I called the office and said, is this right? This time I actually called. I said, is this right? Because, this is technically Friday and I don't start up until Saturday. And I said, because I was sent this load and I don't start up until tomorrow night late. And they said, yep, it's open. Both the pickup and the drop off is open. They're open appointments. So you can get it when you start back up again. I'm like, okay, no problem. The only thing is, I would have to find an empty again. I would have to start by finding an empty because this is going over to pick up at a place called New Cold in McDonough. And I did ask if I needed to pick up a reefer, because is New Cold a reefer, a refrigerated load place? And they said, no, just a regular one. Should be fine. Anyway, I didn't feel right about this particular load. I don't know why. Just sometimes they don't feel right. So either way, I stayed in my bed, got up by 8 p.m., started work by 10 p.m. Train had everything stopped. But in a car, you can actually go behind. You can go behind it. It says no vehicle over 3 axles can go this direction if you're in a semi. But I was able to take my car around it and pull in a JB Hunt, which was nice because by the time I did my pre-trip and stuff, tired. I was able to head out of there. The train had cleared over the next 20 minutes, and so right as I hit my button to log on at 10 p.m., I heard another train. So I'm starting to wonder if this train is going to hold me up. And the train was definitely going by. But I'd taken the opportunity to do my pre-trip. And then I looked over and I said, wait a minute, I don't have a preloaded container in the app for this New Cold load. And I said, I don't know what's going on. I could have sworn there was one there before, but it wasn't the case. So anyway, I headed out to try to find an empty. Went by all the close places as fast as I could so that way I could start the clock on the find the empty clock that I mentioned before. You have to go through to 3 driveways before it starts the clock. So I went to the first 2 places that are very, very quick, and then the third place that was next. Even though I know one of those places is closed, I still went by. Who knows? They could change their hours, right? And then the next place, as soon as I pull up there, she just sees me coming in bobtail, shook her head. So I just pulled right back out of there, went to my next place, pulled up there, and the guy looks at me out the window and he then does this number. So I'm like, okay, that could not have been much faster for me to get on the clock for this. Anyway, I go to all the usual suspects. I contact the office. Hey, I can't find an empty. If maybe they would stop having me take all these, in gates into the rail lines. I've had to in gate into Austell and Fairburn a whole bunch lately. Maybe if I didn't do that and there were so many in gates that are in gating empties, which you're not allowed to take empties out of the rail, maybe it would be easier for me to find empties. Since contractually, I came to learn this way, contractually you're supposed to take an empty when you grab a loaded trailer. So again, maybe if we didn't take all of our empties into the rail and you actually bought additional trailers or something like that, maybe we would have an easier time. But guess what? If it's something that affects the driver, low priority, unless it's something that starts to cost us. Like if it starts to cost us making appointment times or something like that. Anyway, finally ended up finding one at an Electrolux, which is fairly close. Also, it's a new close location, which is going to become a new place for me to go. Probably my number 1 place. Mainly because they seem to have a pretty decent facility and they have a very organized process. The guy said, here to pick up empty. He types in a couple of things, hits a button, and it prints up a list. He says, these are our empties. And I'm like, wow, okay, there was like 12 of them listed. So anyway, grabbed one, got to New Coal right at midnight. And I came to find out, they let me in, and then I went to the shipping office, and it came to find out my load was in draft status. So after like 20 minutes or so, they said, yeah, your load is in draft status, meaning that it has to be resubmitted because we can't get it to you. I said, well, how long would that be? And they said, if y'all resubmitted it, fairly quickly, then it would still probably be a few hours. And so I contacted the office and I said, okay, this load is not going to be ready for hours. That's if it were submitted right now. And he says, all right, where do you want to go? And I said, someplace far away. Little did he know what I was really saying is I wanted to be far away from working that night because I was already just not happy with things in general. But anyway, he assigned me to do a pickup at Walmart in Port Wentworth, Georgia. So it was an easy drop and hook, and I was back to Fairburn around 9:40 a.m. Had called the office and messaged twice, but still didn't have a load. So there was a bad storm coming in, and I was hoping to just hook something before the rain just got really, really bad. But anyway, I was really puzzled also. I somehow had an extra hour on my load. I started up at 10 p.m., but I was looking at it and I had an extra hour someplace, and I could not think about why it was. I looked at the clock. I'm like, it looks right. I don't know why I would have an extra hour. And then suddenly it hit me. When is daylight saving time? It's spring as of the time of this recording. And suddenly I looked it up and it said, oh, well, that's what happened at 2 a.m. It jumped ahead an hour, which is why I still had another hour. So anyway, that was kind of interesting. And I had to wait about an hour at the rail line before I was finally pre-assigned something. And I had 2 hours and 15 minutes left on my clock. And after waiting there for an hour, I decided I was going to head back to Palmetto and just shut down. Whatever. I don't care. I'm so tired of waiting for people to come into the office because they just don't decide to have a planner that comes in the middle of the night to serve us. And I talked to some of the office staff and they're like, nope, I can't set you up. I can't do that. We need to wait for a planner. Okay, fine. So I went to Palmetto. Right as I was pulling into the parking spot in Palmetto, I get pre-assigned on a load. And it's picking up in Austell. And it's going to Andalasia, Alabama, Shaw Flooring. And I say to myself, you know what? I could just go ahead and shut down here and then start and go to Austell tomorrow. Or I can go ahead and go to Austell now. It's still a weekend. It's Sunday morning. I can go on the back road, go straight over there, pick it up, and then come straight back. Because I knew I was not going to be able to get on the interstate and get down to Noonan, which would be the first place to shut down. So I went ahead and did that. I picked up in Austell, and then I came and shut down again at the Palmetto terminal. Also, I had to print out the bill of lading for this load because there was no bill of lading box. The entire box was gone. So anyway, printed that up, no problem. I really strongly recommend getting a printer if you're on an intermodal account, especially with JB Hunt, because it comes in handy tremendously. On my Tuesday, I headed out and drove straight to Shaw. Kept the speed below 10 miles an hour the whole time that I was in their yard, but the damn truck kept jumping out of yard move. So, so I was like, I don't know why this is happening. I would click to on duty and then I would go back to yard move and I would try I would slowly go, keeping it under 10 miles an hour. And after about 2 minutes, I would see it jump into the drive line. I'm like, you piece of crap. I can't believe that it did that again. I am not hitting above 19 miles an hour. I'm keeping it below 10, which is creeping along, driving me crazy. Because I could probably use the gas pedal, accelerate to where I was, and then go on duty. And it probably cost me all of 3 minutes inside this thing. But instead I'm creeping along inside the stupid yard and watching my clock reset because it jumps on the drive line. Anyway, I had to sit there after I pulled in there and hooked up the trailer, did my pre-trip and stuff like that. I had to sit there for 15 more minutes because the stupid clock wasn't done. ELDs are the most annoying things in the world. I know they're designed for safety purposes and they're designed to try to help keep us safe and stuff, but they are very, very annoying. If there are some places that I pull in that I'm not happy with the loud conditions and people yelling and people backing up constantly and just all the vehicles, I would so leave a yard in the middle of the night if I could and go someplace else. There have been some times there was one time in Schneider, I remember I was stuck in rush hour on 75 North. All I was trying to do is get to Schneider because I didn't want to have to pull over the side of the road and sit there for 30 minutes on break just so I could go a few more minutes. Luckily, I got there and went on duty with Schneider when I only had a matter of a few minutes left because it's so annoying. ELDs are so annoying for so many reasons. Anyway. And yeah, I'm a bit bitter because I'm also tired and stuff like that. I was not very pleased with the way that my day ended up, especially when I came to realize that I had worked the same amount this week. But just because I'll get to it, let me finish going over everything. Anyway, because of a stupid glitch, I kept having to sit there on duty and creep along with the truck jumping out of yard move. And amazingly, when I would sit there on duty and I would jump into fifth gear, which just means that I'm going to go 4 miles an hour forward. Going 4 miles an hour, it doesn't jump onto the drive line. So I can't use as an excuse that maybe the speedometer isn't connected correctly, because if it was, I would be going 8 or 9 miles an hour, never exceeding 10, and it jumps out of yard move. So for whatever stupid reason. Anyway, so I got down there to Shaw, did my drop, and I was pre-assigned to in-gate my container into Fairburn, which sucks because there's no drop fee. There was quite a few things I did this week that was no drop fees. Didn't drop off something before I picked up my empty at the very beginning, so there's no drop fee. You're wasting your time not being paid to find an empty. Finally, you found an empty, and then it was like in-gate back into, so anyway. So I got back to Fairburn. I was pre-assigned to go back to Austell and pick up, and then go to the a Hasbro company of some sort in Puller, Georgia. It's basically Hasbro toys and Hasbro stuff. So now it was rush hour on Monday. So it took me a little while. I went on back roads to get to from Austell to get to 285 because 20 was totally jammed up. Excuse me. And then I went 285 around to 75 and started because that standstill traffic on 20 I wasn't about to go through. So I ended up making my way and shut down in Jackson, Georgia, which is the Pilot 201. Not the Flying J, the Pilot. Pilot's more organized. They're not as tight and crazy, and not all companies can fuel up there, so there's a little less traffic and stuff. But anyway, I ended up pulling my schedule back 2 hours because my Monday ended up going with me picking up and then getting back over there. It was actually like 30 something in the afternoon when I shut down because of the time change. So now I was able to back up my schedule about 2 hours and change because I still had a bunch of time on my drive clock, that 3 hours, and I had some time left, just less than an hour on my drive. I did have to print the bill of lading again, though. So again, get a printer. I was also pre-assigned a local Atlanta load, which was really interesting because it was pick up at a place in Savannah and drop off at the JB Hunt terminal. The funny thing is, I thought it was telling me to drop off at a CSX line there. I don't know why. I could have sworn I saw it said CSX. So that morning when I got up and was doing my pre-trip, I contacted the office and said, "Hey, I'll be there not long. Could I request a pre-assignment? Maybe something coming out of the rail yard?" And the guy that I spoke to was like, "Coming out of the rail yard?" I said, "Yeah, since I'm dropping off at CSX, it'd be cool to be able to grab something out of there." He was kind of puzzled, and then after I got off the phone with him, I realized it was dropping off at JB Hunt. It was not dropping off at a CSX terminal in Savannah, because I don't know there is one. So that's probably the confusion. Anyway, got to the Hasbro, dropped off. They had one empty, but it had a shredded tire. And I knew I was going to have to find an empty. If I pulled that one off of the yard, then I would have to call roadside and they'd have to come out and whatever. And I just was not in the mood to do that. I would rather find an empty. So I sent a message to the OBC saying there's one trailer there, has a shredded tire. I'm not going to grab that. I'll have to find an empty. After I sent that message, for some reason, the pickup that I had picking up at Cal Cartage and dropping off at JB Hunt, for whatever reason, it was approved as a bobtail. When I got to Cal Cartage, they told me that I was the only bobtail approved that night. And for some reason, it dispatched. It did not require me to give them an empty. So I was like, well, geez, fine. I'm going to bobtail over there, and if they reject me, then they reject me. But the guy said, you're the only bobtail that's approved to come in here and pick up tonight. So I was like, cool. So I went and picked up that container, dropped it off at JB Hunt, get a drop fee for a drop-off pickup fee for picking up at Cal Cartage, but I do not get one for dropping off at the JB Hunt, which is annoying. And the office did tell me I had to get an empty this time. Find it empty. Great. I went to Walmart, the Walmart I've been to out there. Nope, wouldn't give me one. But the Shaw that I had been to recently, and they weren't able to take that load from me. I think it was last week. I did ask them if I could get it empty, and they said, sure, go around the back and grab one. I was like, thank you. I got lucky there. Stupid truck kept jumping out of yard move again. So I was going less than 5 miles an hour in their Shaw yard because at this point, we had been driving so long, I needed to make sure I got my break in so that way I get my last 3 hours back. I was so pissed though. I ended up staying in their yard until that 30-minute break had expired. Got on the road and made it to Target because that's where I was pre-assigned to pick up a load at Target and lug off at 6:15 a.m. And this visit was cursed. First of all, it took a while for them to find my trailer because the wrong trailer number was listed in their system, which was then told to us. So it was actually 235664 or whatever, but it was listed in the system as 255664. So the guy was like, yeah, I don't have that trailer number. I don't have that trailer number. I don't have that trailer number. And then he was going through emails. He said, wait a second now. I see a 235664. Let me contact the office and ask them, is that for? And I said, let me ask you real quick, is it going to? And I told him the day. She said, yes, that's exactly where it's going. So it took him a few minutes to contact his person and find out that, yes, that was the same load. It was just because she had the right trailer number. Somebody entered it in the system wrong. So anyway, I had to go get this trailer. Now, on the drive side of the trailer, it was this far away from the next trailer over. So I had to back up there. And it was also about 4 feet farther back. So I had to crawl underneath the front of the trailer in order to come up, in order to connect up, which was very, very tight because I'm not a small guy. I had to crawl underneath and think thin, skinny thoughts in order to connect up the air lines and the electrical, and then I had to crawl back down. And that was being able to pull it out just a few feet so that way I could lift the landing gear. Now, at this point, it's later in the morning. I know that I'm about to, as soon as I get on the interstate, headed out of lug off, I'm going to run into a way station right there in Columbia, and then there's going to be the way station in Georgia right on the inside of the Georgia line, and I am not interested in getting stopped. So as I'm doing my pre-trip and I observe that there are 2 lights out on the trailer, I look through my thing and I have the lights and I'm like, awesome, I can replace it. But one of the lights, the multi-purpose light in the very back on the left-hand side inside, is I can't pull it out because it has this stupid chrome thing over it. I try busting it out with my hammer and my screwdriver. It's not budging. I tried just pulling really hard. It's not busting the pop rivets. So I'm like, great. I'm going to have to find someone to help me. I stop and ask one of the yard jockeys. He says, you see that? There's if you go down road G, there is a service truck there. They can help you. I said, okay, great. I find the service truck. The guy's not in it. Ends up being that he's in the bathroom inside there for over 30 minutes. By the time he comes back out and I say, hey, can you help me with something? All I need is an Allen key, and I could pop this off because I thought it was an Allen key at the time. It ended up being either drill or hit it the right way and the pop rivets will pop off. He says, I can't help you. I'm like, oh, really? He said, yep, can't help you. And I'm like, out of curiosity, it would just probably take you a moment if you have a drill or a way to pop it off. He says, I can't do it. 2 reasons. I said, okay. He says, number one is that's not a Target trailer, and I have to stay available for Target trailers. And I'm like, okay, this is a matter of like, it would take you 3 to 5 minutes at most, and you could stay available, and if you had to leave, you could. And the other reason was because he says also there's no way for me to bill it. There's no billable hours here. So I basically have to work off the clock. I'm like, okay, I guess he just sits there off the clock until he is put to work, and then that's billable hours. Anyway, whatever. So I was very frustrated about this whole thing. Oh, another thing about this particular trailer Oh, I forgot about is when I had to crawl underneath to come in and connect up my airline. The airline, the emergency airline, was so loose. It was just whoosh, it was just blowing air. But I was like, I'm going to see if I can pull forward the trailer just enough. When I release it, will it release just enough for me to pull it forward? And it did before it lost enough air pressure. But that's fine. I was able to go back there with my hammer, and I hit the glad hand, just the lock part on the side, just in enough so that way it would make a good seal. And it made a nice tight seal, not overly tight. It was perfect like it's supposed to be. And I was able to finish doing my pre-trip, finish raising up the landing gear and doing all that kind of stuff. And then I went and found the tech trailer or whatever the guy was. Anyway, after the guy didn't help me, I was in a bitter mood, but I got to the gate, and the lady's like, yeah, you need to pull up another 10 feet. I'm like, okay, sorry, I'm a little bit bitter right now. And I told her what was going on. She said, you know what? I'll go back there with you to look at it. I'm like, thank you. It was 10 feet after all. So she came out and had to go, instead of going straight out, she had to go out and go 10 feet over to the side to look at the seal. I guess she's so used to saying, driver, pull forward for 10 feet. Anyway, I went to the pilot down the street there in Lugoff and asked a few drivers around there, including a couple of JB Hunts. They didn't have the ability to pop the rivets off or something like that. I asked a few other people. Finally called roadside, and they said, let me put you on hold for a moment. And they called, and there was one tech in the area, he said. But he says, it's going straight to their voicemail. He said, let me see if I can find their hours of operation. Oh, they don't open until 8. I'm like... Because at this point, it was like 6 something. It was like barely after 6. I'm like, I'm not going to wait for 2 hours for this stupid thing. So I was like, if there is a way in the world for me to make this work, I'm going to. So I was asking around. A nice redneck dude was there with his truck, and he had all kinds of this stuff in the bed of the pickup truck. He was really nice. Very rednecky, though. He was chewing tobacco and smoking a cigarette while doing it. Very country sounding. Anyway, very nice guy though. And he was like, yeah, you just need to get this thing off of there. He says, I can't drill it out for you though, because I don't have the right bit for it. I'm like, that's fine. So anyway, what I realized is that the light, which I have the light, I just couldn't get. I could unplug it, and I could reach my hand in there and unplug it from the other light, but the other light goes in. So what I realized is that what I could do is plug it up, and I could verify my light's working. And if I jammed it, it was loose. But what I ended up finding in one of the compartments is this kind of tape that's got like it's sticky, tarry type stuff and on the back. So I was able to take that run it around the inside of the light. Excuse me, sorry. And then jam it directly up to the face of it. And I jammed it with such force that it was able to stick with this little tar tape type stuff. It's kind of like, it felt kind of like, you know, the when you plug a car tire, that kind of tar type material. It was like a very thin layer of that. It was tape that was kind of like that. It was silver on one side, and it was that kind of material on the other side. But I was able to pull it off enough in little strips and put it around, lining it, so that way I could jam it in there. And I went ahead and hit the road. The other light, I looked at it and said, it's one of those on the side that is not going to be the side that the cameras are going to be noticing at the way station. So as long as I'm not pulled in and told to check things, it'll be fine. Anyway, I go ahead and hit the road. Get through the one, and right before I get to the way station there in Columbia, I pull over at the like exit or two before, just to make sure that it wasn't hanging out and hanging by the cable, and it wasn't. It was still in there, nice and smooth. So I got through there, and then the exit before the Georgia way station, I got out and looked at it just to make sure it was still working. Sure as the world, it still was. Got there, just like at the Columbia way station, it said trucks must enter way station. I pulled through there. It was only like a 29,000 pound load or something like that. So it was fine. No sliding tandems or anything. Got through there, no problem. And I ended up shutting down at the Loves off of exit 172. And then I decided I was going to recall the, I had like 14 minutes left on my clock, and I recalled the roadside assistance people and told them where I was. They got off the phone with me and they said they'd send out a tech. And a few months later, they call me back and say, all right, you can go on and check in with Love's support there. Because you're at a Love's, they don't allow outside vendors out of their yard to do a repair. So you have to use theirs. I'm like, great. So I go in there and ask them. I'm like literally the parking spot right across from them. All they have to do is just walk straight out 20 feet and you're right there. But he says, I need you to back in here. I'm like, I'm right there. You can't just walk over 20 more feet. I don't really want to lose this parking spot, even though it was like early. It still was perfectly fine. There was plenty of parking spaces. He's like, no, for service, you got to come in here. He wasted over an hour of my time before doing a 3-minute long fix. He basically went in there, and after sitting inside there, they did a full walk around and they kicked tires. They looked over things. Took 30 minutes total doing that and wasting time. Then he came out there and used the parts that I had and took all of 3 minutes to fix the light. He ended up hitting the pop rivets off with like a chisel, it looked like, or something. It wasn't a screwdriver. It might have been a different design. But anyway, he popped them off, and then there's a rubber gasket thing behind it. He was able to pull the light through, so he pulled it out, put my light in after connecting it up, and then the side light he went ahead and connected up too. Either way, I was out of my truck for over an hour, which I was really annoyed by because all I wanted to do was head down, finish what I was doing, and then go to sleep. Anyway, one thing I have come to realize is that I hate, the sliding tandems when it's the like wire looking thing. That's not an issue. It's the one that have a handle. It looks like a bar, like a flat bar like this. It comes out and angles over, and you grab that handle and you pull it. Those bars are annoying as crap. And they're very hard to get released. You have to pull forward, pull backwards a little bit, allow there to be like no pressure on the tandems, and then still it doesn't want to release. So you have to pull forward until it stops. Then it still won't release. You have to back up again until it won't release again, and then you pull forward and try to just pull the neutral and allow it to kind of settle in. Anyway, it was just that blade just was not going. Really, really annoying when I was trying to pick up someplace and they said, slide your tandems back. That was the target. Slide your tandems. Well, I was not able to because the stupid tandems were jammed. Anyway, my Thursday, I got up and I got to Atlanta without drama, and I was pre-assigned to pick up a Lowe's load in Rincon, Georgia, and bring it back to Atlanta. So again, you had to grab an empty. You don't get paid to grab an empty. And I had asked the office for locations, and they were sending me 20 plus miles farther south into Warner Robins was the closest place to pick up an empty down there. And I said, isn't there a place on 75 southbound that I could grab one before I get to 16? They said, well, it's, he sent you the load. There's plenty there. I'm like, yes, but it requires me going 20 minutes past the turnoff to get to 16. And then I have to go 20 minutes back. And I'm not compensated for that. So if you happen to have any empties that are on 75, that would be much appreciated. They said, okay, try the Wayfair, which is right next to the New Cold that I was at on my Monday. And so anyway, I decided, I was like, at the beginning, I was thinking, they're not going to have an empty. They're not going to have an empty. I went ahead and said, I'm not going to stop there. But then as I was approaching, I said, you know what? It doesn't feel wrong. I'm going to go ahead and stop there. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? So anyway, I pull off the exit. It's like 3 minutes off the exit. And when I pull up there and I get up to the gate, it says after hours, you got to ring the buzzer. I pull up and stop, pull the parking brakes, and the door starts opening. I'm like, oh, the gate's opening. Cool. So I go into the gate and I look and I see like a W9 or whatever, which is on the sign on the door, on the gate. It said, check in with W9 after you get there. I walked in there. There was a lady working there who saw me, kind of gave me a little tiniest like Mona Lisa type smile, and then she opens up the door and does this number, hands me a Post-it note. And I said, what's this? And she said, you're here for an empty, right? I said, yeah, how'd you know? And she said, because you're not pulling a trailer. And JB Hunts, whenever they show up, they either are showing up for an empty or they're here to exchange a trailer. So I figured you're here to pick up an empty. I'm like, awesome, thanks. And she said, that's your trailer number. So I was like, even better. So at this point, I drive around there and I hook up the trailer, which is in their receiving lot. I was buzzed into the to the ramp. It was perfect. I pulled out of there. It was great. That was streamlined. I just wish I got compensated for it, anything. But no, you don't get compensated for picking up empty. So anyway, I got to Lowe's. It was a huge yard. Stayed on duty at 4 miles an hour until I hit my brake duration, then took 14 minutes to drive to my parking lot spot, which was 2:14. Anyway, I had to spend an extra 14 minutes on the clock parked before I could head out of there because of the stupid log device, because of our getting trailers that have I forgot what I was saying. Jeez, I'm getting tired. Anyway, let me finish this up. I was starting to head down south, head towards where I was going. I had just less than 1 hour left of my drive and 1 hour, over 1 hour left on my non-drive clock, and so I shut down at the Pilot in Jackson, Georgia. My DRT kept changing. I would put it in as 10:15 with 8 hours remaining, and it would change. And it would change not to just being blown out, which is like 22 with a certain number of hours left. No, it kept changing to like 9:56 p.m. with 9 hours. And then another time it changed to a 9:54 with 9 hours. I'm like, what are you doing? I'm going to get there by 8:15. I got so annoyed by that. So when I woke up, first of all, we're entering a hot spell. So it was kind of cool overnight. So when I was idling the truck as I was, in here, and I went into the Pilot, take a shower and stuff like that, and came back out, the truck was idling. Before I went in there, afterwards, it was shutting down. Excuse me, it was shutting down. So I realized that the temperature must have been over 65 degrees, and I was like, okay, fine. Or under 65 degrees. So I said, okay, fine, I'll give it a little bit of time. And after a little bit of time, the temperature went up over 65, and so I didn't have to keep stomping the gas pedal in order to wake up the truck or stop the truck from shutting down. But after only about 3.5 to 4 hours of sleep, I woke up and I was sweating because the truck decided it wasn't going to idle anymore. I decided to crank it up and let it sit there. It was 78 degrees outside. And I was hoping and praying that the truck would realize this and it would stay idling. So after a few minutes, it beeps, which means it's going to shut down again. I use my hammer to cram the pedal in, which is the recent video I did. And finally, everything catches, and it was great, and I was out of there. Finally, once my clock restarted, my brain is starting to wander. I had a hard time sleeping for 2 nights in a row, basically. The first, the night before last, I couldn't sleep. I slept like an hour and 15 minutes, and I woke up and I was well rested as if I was awake for 7 hours. I look at my clock, I'm like, that was an hour and 15 minutes. And I have a hard time going back to sleep. Finally, when I did, I would wake back up. Why? Because the stupid truck kept shutting off, and it kept starting burning up in here. I used my hammer, but the vibrations, I didn't jam anything under there to keep the thing in place, so the accelerator and the brake would vibrate a little bit and would knock my hammer out of place, so I was not able to idle the truck very long before I would wake up again. Finally, after a little while, I said, you know what, I know why this is happening. So I jammed something under under the hammer, so that way it wouldn't vibrate and slowly loosen, and finally I was able to get my sleep. But anyway, it had basically idled for a while, and then I got up and headed out. So, I had gotten out. I think I said this already, but I had picked up where was it? I was coming back from someplace. What does it say? Oh. Anyway, where was I? I picked up at the Lowe's in Rincon. That's where I was. And I was coming back, but I wasn't able to make it all the way to Atlanta, so I shut down. Because if I made it there and I dropped off the load, I would have to shut down someplace. And I don't want to end up paying $25 to shut down the Petro. So I shut down there an hour and a few minutes early. Whatever. So today, a few hours ago, I started up my clock. I drove to Atlanta and dropped off. And I was messaging them and said, can you pre-assign me something? Because I was stuck in traffic there was a car accident on 75 North. So, I had some start, stop, and literally stopped on the interstate. So I sent a message and said, would love a pre-assignment. And they pre-assigned me a pickup in Brazelton and come back down, which means what? You have to grab another empty. So when I got to the, a stop light that was going to be red for a while, I messaged and said, is there anything at all I could take out of the yard? Is there something I could take to Anderson, South Carolina, or a little farther away, even Greenville? And he responded back, no, there's nothing on wheels. I said, how about out of the Infinity Yard or out of Lot 12 in Atlanta or Austell or Fairburn, anything? He said, nothing that's on the ground, which means everything's still on the train. So if I want to go and sit there and wait for a train, for who knows how long, I could. Or I can just leave and go off and do this. I was like, okay, fine. Can you send me locations for an empty? And they sent me about 11 miles farther than my exit to grab my empty. So I loop around in the place, and I forgot what it was called, Tom Dollar Road or something like that. I forgot what it was. It's a weird name. Anyway, a toy something yard off of exit 137. Sorry, camera just moved. But they gave me an empty, which was nice. So I picked it up. I went and picked up in Brazelton. It was actually a Carter's location. So anyway, I picked up there and drove it straight to Fairburn. Now, I had set my DRT very accurately, like I always do. I had set it so that way that it would be good when I arrived at 12:45 a.m. and it would reflect my 6 hours remaining and change. But for whatever stupid reason, the planner blew it out. I was on the road for barely over an hour, and instead of looking to see if I was indeed close, he went ahead and changes it 22:22 with 6 hours remaining. So when I get to the rail yard, I have a DRT that's set. I hit refresh, it's still set. And then I'm like, okay, I do my post-trip inspection. I do the stuff, and I'm sitting there looking. I hit refresh again, and it was 22:22, meaning that he blew it out. 22:22 with 8 hours remaining, and I only had 6. I'm like, you're not even getting it right. You know what? At this point, I was so frustrated. I'm like, I have offered. What was I saying? Brain. Oh, I had offered to go and take something out. And I was routinely told to grab an empty this week. So for driving barely over an hour going from Brazelton down to the rail line, he reset my DRT. Didn't even bother looking where I was or the fact that it could be accurate. He went ahead and changed it. So at this point, I'm frustrated. This entire week has been, go grab an empty, go grab an empty, go grab an empty, which means no stop fees. So it cost me about $250 because of multiple different times when I had to grab an empty and was not paid the mileage, wasn't paid anything of the sort. And I was not about to sit there and wait, because when I got to the Fairburn rail yard, there were 2 rail lines that had trains on them, and they were kind of jamming up to and from the TTR, except this one way that you could see on them. Anyway, I was like, you know what? If you're just going to blow out my hours and whatever, I had 6 hours and 47 minutes left. I said, you know what? I'm not going to bother giving you that because I've already wasted so much time this week. I don't care. And so I went ahead and set my clock for 10 p.m. on my Sunday, 2 days from now. And I came on back here to Palmetto and shut down. And then I'm doing this recording. If they are not going to pay me for my weights, they're not going to pay me to get an empty, they're not going to pay me for wasting time on trains and that kind of stuff, fine. If I want to finish my clock early because they want me to update my DRT, fine. I'll update my DRT and I'll put it in for Sunday. Whatever. I don't care. Anyway, better call it before I doze off again. I'm going to try to take a nap here because I didn't sleep very well because the stupid truck kept shutting off. At least it's cool because it's night now. So I'll be able to lay down there, take a couple of hours nap before I wake up. And then I'll go off and see my family and start my day. Anyway, thanks for watching.